Welcome back to the DreamHack HCT Grand Prix, woo, live from Tours, France. We finally have our final 4 contenders, guys, and it is Scruffy, Bizes, Maverick, and Savvat. And our match now will be Maverick taking on Savvat for the first spot in the championship finals. Bringing you all the action will be Lorinda and Derek Brown on the desk. And this one is going to be a good one. With Maverick, we've seen him on stream quite a bit so far over this weekend. He has the Dead Man's Hand Warrior. We know it. We hate to have to watch it, even though it is pretty cool because the games can take a very long time. But then Savvat, completely on the other end of the spectrum. Today, he 3-0'd his opponent with Even Shaman. The most dominant performance that we've seen from this deck in the duration of the tournament. So this one could be very, very polarized, Lorinda.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's 2 of the most unique lineups in the whole tournament as well. They're in the semi-final. That says something for the uniqueness as well. And interesting to see, I think a lot of people were saying that even Shaman and Dead Man's Warrior were sleepers, but we didn't really think they'd be doing this well, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And even with those 2 exact decks, how they match up against each other is very interesting indeed, because I was talking with Janos during the break, one of the players who also employed the Even Shaman strategy, so very similar styles of play to Savvat, and he was saying he thinks that the Warrior might actually draw out the ban in this instance, kind of the cornerstone signature deck from Maverick, and he's thinking it's so strong because of the wide board clear AoE, as well as the single target removal that Warlock lacks, that could be drawing out the ban.
That was my inkling as well after we saw Savvat's match. He has the Paladin and the Even Shaman, and both of those decks are so weak against the Warrior that it may be the first time we actually see that Warrior drawing out the ban in this tournament. But then from Maverick, we've seen such consistency. We've seen that Warrior perform very, very well, but even when that Warrior was knocked out first, then the Warlock just came in, and Maverick still proceeded to completely dominate in that matchup. So let's check out the picks and bans and find out, is that Warrior going to be banned away, or will we be seeing it yet again? What's the game plan here? All right, so the Rogue, Paladin, and Warrior are still alive for Maverick, and the Warlock has been banned. That is the traditional strategy against his lineup. And Savvat has the Paladin, Druid, and Shaman, with his Warlock being banned away. What do you think about this one, Derek?
I mean, in terms of the decks that they had to ban, Maverick had a lot more leeway here because we've seen him consistently banning the Quest Rogue when it has been offered to him, because he kind of has to get rid of that deck, considering how kind of vulnerable he is to it with his Warrior and his Warlock. However, for Savvat, you know, we were saying how much he wanted to ban the Warrior, but going with what was my first instinct as well, that the Warlock is simply too strong against his entire lineup and has to ban that away. So we could potentially be seeing, for, I believe, the 3rd time on stream from Maverick, a 3-0 victory with his Warrior, which is would be truly impressive, but we know he is capable of it, given how truly fantastic he is with this deck.
If Savvat thought he was going to be a 3-0 victory, he'd have banned it. He obviously doesn't think the same way we do. He obviously thinks he can get it done against that Warrior, because the Warlock, he can definitely get it beat with the Paladin.
That's true.
Under some situations at least. So he obviously feels that he can get it done. Be interesting to see if he's actually right.
It's a tough call. It really is. That Warrior is so powerful, but any aggressive deck can get the better of it if it doesn't have the tools that it needs to combat very early, very wide board states. So it is possible to take the Warrior down. We saw it happen earlier today, but then the Warlock just came in to sweep the match from there. The Warlock is banned this time, however. So will it be a repeat performance, or will Savvat take this one and beat Maverick? What do you guys think, Lorinda?
I think Maverick's going to get it done, but Savvat, I would like to see win a tournament. He's on my team to follow, and he's the only one left who hasn't won something big since that happened. So I'm biased. I would think so. I'm going to pick Savvat and just go against what I think will happen.
Okay, interesting strategy there, as I think with the way it's lined up and in terms of the decks and the play we've seen, Maverick feels like he's kind of in the lead here. These decks from Savvat, they're a little bit too vulnerable to consistent board clears, and though we've seen very strong Shaman play with him, aggressive options, finding that perfect window for lethals, Maverick's decks, I think, just line up too well.
I think that I agree with Derek, but to be fair, we didn't see a lot from Savvat earlier. All we saw was that Even Shaman deck, so he could still have something hidden under his sleeves. I'm excited to see, regardless, how this matchup is going to end up. So our first semifinal of the day to determine who our first finalist will be, coming up right now.
Just those 3 more matches to go, the 2 semi-finals and the final. And the top half of the draw has been absolutely ridiculous. It's continuing to be ridiculous with Savvat versus Maverick. You've heard the picks there. I think we all think that Maverick will win, but I'm going to go out there and just cheer for Savvat anyway.
He's got a special place in your heart.
He really has. I mean, in WSG, the word around the floor was that he was just the best player there. I think he lost the semi-finals on that occasion.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Turner, Matt the Great making that final.
Right, okay. Right.
But Savvat was the one that everyone was talking about as, wow, this guy's good. He's been a very good ladder grinder for a long, long time. Yeah. And he's only really, with that WSG performance, started going to LAN events. So it will be very interesting to see if he can, well, he's got it done, but can he get it done in really unfavourable circumstances? Game number 1 is coming in.
So it is going to be the very interesting, spicy Druid deck from Savvat that we've seen from a couple of players represented here at DreamHack HCT Tour. In the Token Druid, the deck that goes for Violet Teachers, Oaken Summons, as well as all the wideboard buff cards like Power of the Wild, Savage Roar, and the Branching Paths as well, to try and get a nice wideboard early on through the likes of Violet Teacher and Whispering Woods, and Spreading Plague as well to an extent against the more aggressive decks, and then just destroy your opponent in one ultimately powerful turn. Yeah,
and watching Boar Control learn this deck with Muzzy, pretty much the inventor of this deck, in the chat, and he just kept saying, no, that's wrong, no, that's wrong, no, that's wrong. Of course you can win this matchup. We're looking at matchups where, of course, you can't win, and Muzzy's just saying, no, all you have to do is just draw this right now.
Yeah.
But the first match here, how does the Rogue deal with these crazy whiteboards full of wisps and other such nonsense?
Well, obviously,
if they get drawn.
The kind of pseudo AoE for Rogue is the Vanish, which obviously not actually dealing with any threats, but a huge tempo swing in your favor and lots of quest activation possibilities then. But I think the main thing here for the Rogue is less dealing with a big board when it comes down, but trying to negate the possibility of that ever happening, because obviously you can play around Spreading Plague by not making a wide board, and even with something like Violet Teacher, going for a sap on it straight away if you have that possibility, or just praying that your opponent doesn't find these wide boards at the start is the best case scenario for the Rogue. But Savvat is absolutely starting to find those possibilities with, Whispering Woods into potentially Sea Giant or Savage Roar on the following turn. This is going to be a crazy, if not lethal, amount of damage surprisingly quickly.
Yeah, this deck can just absolutely batter people when it gets going. Like the Power of the Wild buff is permanent, the Branching Paths buff is permanent.
Yeah.
These are things that Savage Roar doesn't do. And Maverick's just got to race away here. Look at those sad Glacial Shards just sitting there doing very little.
That's the thing. If you're
Where's
going
the Vanish?
Yeah, wide on a board, your answer is only Vanish. We have seen, it's worth pointing out now, a few of these quest roads tech against the Paladins by putting in Fan of Knives. It's making its way into a few of the lists because it's seen as kind of like a middle-of-the-road option in terms of anti-aggro decks, because obviously against the control decks you just cycle it, but against the more aggressive decks you can destroy an entire board like this one. But as you just gesticulated, Savvat gets some very spicy draws coming up indeed, with 5 damage on board, and then that could be an extra 10 buff with the Branching Paths, or 12, 13 extra damage with Savage Roar Hero Power.
Now, yeah, what do you do with the Branching Paths? You don't want to get your Branching Paths to vanish. You want it to stick around for 2 turns, not the 1 if you possibly can.
Agreed.
And so the Wisps come back down for 0 each. Remember this. Yeah. So if you put them back down unbuffed and then just buff them the turn after a vanish, you're in good shape. So not blowing your Branching Paths until needed is important.
Very good point, I think, there, Neil, because obviously we were most excited about the buff cards because he's got a nice wide board of 5 Wisps all ready to go. But the thing is, you're not delivering lethal on this turn. You're probably not even setting up 2-step lethal, considering how many ways your opponent can deal with it through charges, scale hides for the rush, or vanish itself. And so by setting up here for almost guaranteed lethal on the following turn, if this sticks with Savage Roar Branching Paths, I think this is a lot safer from Savvat, because it is still saying the only way you deal with this is vanish, and if you do, repopulate the board for basically no mana and just go again.
And if you don't, well, I'm going to hit you for so much damage you're going to cry.
Easy lethal, yeah.
The vanish is there.
It is there, picked up right off the top.
And so, yeah, Savva, good use of Spreading Plague there. You talked about that would be hard to get anything out of. Well, he got out of it a 1-5 and a 4-4, just moved on with his life, rather than being greedy or crazy. I mean, you can't put any more minions on the board. It's not allowed. Yeah. So, yeah, just this setup so early.
But Maverick is a smart player. He knows that this is not going to be the ability to actually win the game on the spot, because it will just be repopulated onto the board.
Yeah, and that's the annoying thing with these Wisps. 28 lined up there at the moment is actually so menacing, but if he doesn't do that, then it's just damned if you do, damned if you don't already.
Yeah, has to go for the Vanish here, because he's expecting, even in kind of the best case scenario where there's no wide board buff card, he still ends up taking too much damage in that scenario, and it very likely is the case that there's something like Savage Roar, Power of the Wild, or Branching Paths.
Yeah, and that was just the Branching Paths alone last turn I was talking about, and now, of course, it's just multiplied even further.
And so now with the ability for every minion on board to get +4 attack on the following turn, even if they all had 0 attack value, that would still be 7 and 4, 28 damage. So it's beyond even close to being lethal here, even if there were lifesteal possibilities available at the moment with the Scale Hide that we see on the far left of Maverick's hand. It just doesn't appear like there's anything that can pull this out. He's trying.
How many can he freeze?
Okay.
I mean,
he's drawing to the potential of some card that clearly does not exist.
Yeah. So now he's going to go for the freeze route.
Right, because from his perspective, we can see it's not necessarily over. But obviously, even if he freezes 2 minions here, it would still be 25 damage, exact lethal available. Obviously, actually a little bit over with the Savage Roar on board as well. Or with the hero.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That was a good game of Hearthstone.
It was indeed. Savvat doing what the deck is supposed to do here, where you get that wide board. And I think we might have seen it 4 or 5 times on stream now, and it's had pretty middling results, actually. Not particularly good or particularly bad, but consistently, the games where it has lost is because it has 1 or 2 wide boards cleared. It's against paladins that have a quality consecration, or warriors that have warpath. Things like that is what it will be losing to. But in situations like that, when there is no strong answer to actually dealing with the minions rather than just delaying the inevitable, that was an incredibly easy victory there for Savvat.
It was, and this is probably his chance to go through. You can set up boards against the control decks where everything comes back as, you know, 2/2s, and then you kill them the next turn. So you have to wait a long, long time. It'll be a very different game. You play your Wisps and protect them immediately and then come in with a lot of damage.
And so now for Maverick, I was talking about what the Druid is weak to, which is, you know, as I was stating, primarily board clears. If you can deal with every threat they put down before they are able to buff it, then generally you will be removing all their potentials to actually kill you. They do not have that high value of a deck. It's more trying to set up for a strong combo, which is why we can see Maverick going for the Fatigue Warrior, because obviously you have a tremendous amount of Whirlwind-style effects with Warpath, the Blood Razor, even Scourge Lord Garrosh itself. However, with Soul of the Forest thrown in there as well, there's some pretty unique, cool counterplay that this deck from Savvat can achieve.
Yeah, I mean, basically doing nothing for like 10 turns, or probably 8 turns to get some ramp along the way, is his... not his best course of action. He'll do some bits and pieces with the Oaken Summons and such like, but basically he will do nothing for the longest time and try and make it so that Maverick needs 11 mana to clear the board twice.
That's right. Passing turns 1 through 10 with his Druid deck is just the absolute nuts.
what a great aggressive play. But you've got the time to, you know, obviously I'm exaggerating that for effect.
Right.
But you have got time to wait it out and just say, okay, I'm going to try and set up a situation where you can't double clear in one turn. And by that time, you have all the buffs needed, like double Savage Roar plus Branching Paths is a victory.
Yes, exactly.
Let's go with that.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't need to stick that wide of a board. But I was obviously jokingly talking about the best hand that the Druid could find here. And in terms of the first 2 turns that you have, this is kind of it. We've seen this like 3 out of 5 games where it's exactly Wild Growth into Oaken Summons. Even getting the Greedy Sprite out here.
It's funny, we're talking about getting to 10 mana as quickly as possible.
That's
Why
true.
not?
I mean, this could be a staggeringly fast ramp. 4 or even 5 mana crystals gained before turn 10 is the absolute maximum, which is probably overkill. I imagine this Nourish will probably be used for draw to start finding those combos. I was going to make,
because now he has the double Sprite going on, he may be able to use that to his advantage to turn his Nourish into a card fetch card, because you do need a significant amount of cards in your hand to make this combo almost work.
And so now this is a really interesting turning point for Savvat, because he is able to get 3 minions here with a Spreading Plague, which is probably the best he would ever be able to get in this matchup. I think realistically.
Yeah.
But at the same time, while that is getting value out of a card that could be very low value in this matchup, he doesn't have that many ways to actually benefit off of it. He doesn't have Soul of the Forest or Branching Paths or Power of the Wild, any of those buff cards to actually benefit off of that, which is why he's going for the Sea Giant instead here. But
like I say, you're doing nothing until you get to 10 mana. You're just waiting.
Okay,
you know, this
fair
is
enough.
It's not even a threat, really. It's just a way of occupying the warrior's time so that you have a chance of doing something. And now you're going to demand an answer with this playing into the... am I taking Tyrant?
Yes, exactly. And there's actually not many answers that the warrior has. Now that, Sleep with the Fishes is gone, Warpath, you don't have enough mana to clear the board. Obviously, he is not playing Reckless Flurry in this deck, and he wouldn't even have enough armor, even if he did have it. So this board probably actually going to be sticking around on this turn at least, at which point Savage Roar is a respectable buff. And if Savvat could find that Soul of the Forest, which we assume is in this deck list, he could be looking at a very intimidating board indeed.
Yeah, and this is pretty early on as well, trying to keep the warrior's armor under control, just to make sure you're always in range of that one-turn kill. It's two, you set it up and then you one-turn kill the next turn, but let's call it a one-turn kill, otherwise it'll get confusing.
Right.
Maverick, though, doing what this deck does, drawing a bunch of removal cards and not panicking. Both the deck and the Maverick are good at that.
Yes, they are indeed. As this is an interesting point in any Fatigue Dead Man's Hand warrior matchup, where you want to be saving the key cards in your matchup for Dead Man's Hand in infinite shuffling if you think it's necessary. And I get the feeling that with this particular deck, there's so much draw in it, so little value in the Druid deck, that he can actually be very liberal with this removal. Like, in terms of big threatening minions, there's incredibly little. So these Executes and Shield Slams, I think, should be used, obviously, primarily Sea Giant. The second Sea Giant is the main thing you're saving it for. And then outside of that, just, go crazy. Just use them here to make those wide board buffs like Soul of the Forest, Branching Paths, and Power of the Wild that little bit worse. Now, still waiting for Soul of the Forest. Won't be playing the Whispering Woods at all for the longest time, I would think. I would agree with you there. And again, it's just posturing in a way. I keep using that phrase a lot, but the Druid doesn't really have much in the way of threats, as you've just described. Obviously, if you get a Sea Giant, sure, go for it. See if you can occupy them. See if you can get 16 damage out of it. Who knows? I know it's not going to happen. Right. But keeping the armor under control, just to make sure that your one-turn kill, say a couple of minions get removed, is actually a one-turn kill. And this is what is so difficult about playing these style of decks that Savvat has decided to bring here to DreamHack Tour, where it's not a combo deck in the traditional sense, like a Worgen OTK Warrior or something like that, where you're killing your opponent in one turn. It's a deck where your cards are much greater than the sum of their parts. You have to get them to work together in the right way, like a well-oiled machine. If you are just throwing them down on curve and are hoping that they will work together in some miraculous way, like some Druid decks do that will remain nameless, you're not going to win. Yeah, I get it. And this is why you sometimes can't just pick up a deck out of the box and win with it straight away when somebody else has built that deck. But if you've built your own deck, like Muzzy basically did for this, you know how every part works, you know why every little tweak is in there. And I think Savvat's tweaked it a little bit to suit his own brand as well. Plus just general improvements. I mean, the deck was very new. It's not been played by enough people to tune it properly. And this is a deck that isn't going to be hit by the nerfs as well. You are correct. And the match is going to slow down a little. That's an interesting one. So maybe this is a deck you can all start to watch and build at home, ready for Tuesday. I mean, we've seen what it can do here at DreamHack. Like, we know that this is not a deck to be trifled with. It's just, it's the consistency, I think, that is where it will struggle. Because at the top of what it can do in the power level, it looks completely disgusting. Like, you play Spreading Plague on turn 6 and then kill your opponent on turn 7. Like, it can do things, it can do very powerful things very quickly. It's just the consistency with which it does it that I think is the talking point for this deck. I'm also happy to be wrong here, but my gut feel is it's one of those decks that doesn't work when people get used to playing against it so much. Okay. When people get used to what to save to beat it. Right. Like, we know how it works from the Druid point of view. You do nothing for a long time against control and then try and set it up. Yeah. The control can react to that style of play with maybe an extra card in their deck that deals with it if it becomes popular.
just my gut instinct is it's one of those decks that's a little bit too fragile when it really gets the hard analysis of hundreds of tournaments.
Like is a very comparable example as well with Chinoy's up against Scruffy in the last series with Azalina Soul Thief being used to kind of counteract the Azari, you know, where the point is to bring it against that, but people figured it out pretty quickly how to kind of play around that. It did not work out to be as powerful as a combo as people were anticipating it to be once the players had figured out how to play around it.
But the first time you run into it, if you don't know what's happening,
exactly,
you just lose to it. You don't lose to it, you get into real trouble against it at least.
Which is the benefit of bringing decks like this, because although, you know, this Token Druid deck is making the rounds at the moment, it's very famous at the moment in the competitive scene, but it's not particularly popular. It's not something you're practicing against if you had to ration out your time perfectly, which is why for Maverick, he has to be thinking on the fly, and I absolutely have faith in him that he will understand how this matchup works, and I think he has been showing that. The cards he's been using very liberally are Shield Slam and Execute, cards like that, the tall removal, single target removal cards. Whereas you look at his hand, what he's got left, it's Blood Razor. He picked up Warpath at the top. It's the more wide board removal that he knows will be more valuable later on.
Right, and setting up that Blood Razor will be key because that is a 0 mana board clear when it's in the right state.
Okay.
If you can use up one of the charges at the right time on it, going into the Soul of the Forest proc, you can kill all the wisps by blowing up the Blood Razor, and then you've got a wide board you can just brawl away.
Okay.
So for 0 mana, you get the first part of the job done.
Interesting.
Depending how branching paths, and there's ways to counterplay against that as well, but what level of thought have these guys put into how many levels up that ladder you go?
So then, talking of that exact point, as you mentioned, of making Blood Razor a setup for a more powerful board clear, for Savvat, you know, if his combo in the later stages of the game is to go Whispering Woods, Soul of the Forest, that's dealt with pretty easily by Warpath. Like, that just gets decimated very quickly indeed. So maybe saving one of the 2 copies of Spreading Plague that he's already thrown down to go with Spreading Plague, Soul of the Forest might have been a more optimistic line of play to give him a higher chance of sticking that very, very important board.
However, on the other side of that, later in the game, the warrior probably has no minions left, so your Spreading Plague might not even set up a wide board.
Very true, very true.
And this is the fun of a new... I mean, it's not just one new deck, it's 2 decks that... Okay, well, then neither of them are new, we understand they existed.
Sure.
But how many times are you ever going to see this in competitive play?
These are not
this
the
might be the only
decks.
time we ever see this. And, you know, the players need to know how it interacts. So all these back and forths are about not who can work it out the most on their own as well, but also how much you can predict how your opponent's going to save their resources to deal with your problem.
As well, we've been nattering about the metagame of this particular matchup. In the specifics here, Savvat made a pretty big push onto the board, obviously going with the Golem into the Sea Giant to try and make a big push, follow up with double branching paths or Savage Raw branching paths, something of that ilk to push forward a huge amount of damage. Maverick put a pretty quick stop to that, to be perfectly honest. Execute save back to deal with the Giant, used that Blood Razor to which we were alluding, which made for a pretty strong play onto the board. However, does he have the force now to stand up against this second large push onto the board by Savvat, which will very likely be met with a third large push onto the board, because Ultimate Infestation turns are powerful, but the turns afterwards are always even more powerful.
Maverick is almost in the position now where he can use 20 mana to clear the board, because he has 68 health. Like I was saying, can he get enough armor to make it maybe matter? I didn't really think that was possible. But actually, he may be able to clear the final board that we've been talking about over two turns.
Wow, okay.
He may not, but this armor total is a huge number, and there's more to come with his shield block in hand at some point.
I think the main thing was just that he needed to try and find some draw effects, which he absolutely has found here with double Acolyte of Pain. The Scourge Lord Garrosh would obviously power these up a little bit, because then you get the consistent Whirlwind effects, and he wouldn't really in this instance want to go for something like Acolyte triple Warpath, because I would anticipate that Warpath is too valuable of a card in this matchup. But he's starting to get those draw effects so that he will not be running out of those important removal cards.
He's also got the second Armor Smith now for if the Whispering... I don't know how the wisps are called, the Whispering Wispies.
There's been a lot of wispy cards over the years.
If they're played, that's another 14 armor waiting to be held. Suddenly, that is out of range of everything going in one turn.
You never do that in one turn.
Being able to two-turn clear, which you can't. I mean, we talk about this two-turn clear. At the moment, Maverick's hand outside of the Warpath is actually pretty awful in terms of board clears. Okay, Warpath does do 5 to everything.
I agree. I mean, that's the thing. Like Warpath, you know, we've been talking about this. It's the trump card. It's the most powerful card here because it gives you a complete clear board no matter what. But Savvat has decided this is the time to go, maybe not all in, but make a large push to close out the game because he is representing an awful lot of damage here to move towards lethal. And on the following turns, if he can make another board, potentially with Whispering Woods into Soul of the Forest that we've been talking about so much, and then go for a double Savage Roar if this isn't cleared, he's looking to move towards lethal very quickly.
Yeah, at least what he's done here is cut that armor down to a manageable size. It was getting out of control. So Maverick's kind of forced this to happen anyway. There's the brawl, and Maverick's noticeably adjusted his seat there, which is really rare for him. Because he now knows he's got some sort of safety going on.
Yeah, this was a very important find for him again, because the thing that we keep talking about is the fact that Warpath it's not 5 damage to everything in the way that Dragonfire was. It's 5 individual instances of 1 damage, which is a big difference when you're dealing with Death Rattled minions.
Yes, Soul of the Forest, of course, we mentioned it multiple times, being those Death Rattle minion thingy maker.
And open summons. Phrase. Keeping up with the strategy for the moment, Savvat here is just pretty much trying to commit enough to the board to bait out removal, like Scourge Lord Garrosh, Warpath, Brawl, things of that ilk. And there it is. There's that Soul of the Forest. It looks to me like Savvat is going to be making that big push onto the board now. And Maverick, because he found that Brawl and was able to use that removal earlier on, has the answer here, which is so massive.
But this is the only time Savvat's got to go for it. He's just seen a Brawl. It's not going to get better for him against this deck. So this is the ideal time to get this push going. And the Acolyte of Pain signals what's going to happen next. Triple Warpath, drawing 3 cards and wiping out enough of the board when you've got 47 health that you're not scared of anything.
I think the complete board, because you got Harrison on there to trade into the remaining 2/2 as well. I mean, Maverick would have mapped it out. He's not leaving anything on board for the sake of card draw, but because he gets to draw 3 cards with the Acolyte at the same time, this is exactly the situation he needed to be moving towards.
But the Druid did get its job done in game at number 1, as I start writing in my notepad that it's 1-all.
Oh, no, I wouldn't go that
It's
far.
not, it's definitely not, but I like to write in my notepad earlier. And there's the
look at this.
next setup, and this is suddenly the notepad embarrassing moment. Savvat's got another chance of getting through this.
Okay, so he does, however, have the ability to leave only, in hand, only 4 Treants on the board, because he goes Garrosh, Hero Power, Attack in.
Sure.
Which clears off 3 of them, obviously, and clears all the Wisps first. But if he finds another copy of Warpath, and the Blood Razor is going to be very juicy over the next few turns as well. But clearly he's thinking this gives me the highest chance of surviving, because with him being at 49 health, only 4 Treants left on the board, it's so unlikely that it is going to be delivering a lethal. I think nigh on impossible now that we've seen both copies of Branching Path already being thrown down.
Yeah, and you saw what Savvat thought of the situation there. We're seeing it from his viewpoint with the bottom right buddy, and then like, oh, you haven't got another clear? Let's give 1 more turn and see what happens.
As Maverick, I think that was just an animation mistake. He attacked into simply the wrong minion here.
And that can happen when the minions haven't spawned quick enough, right? He should have obviously not attacked.
He should have just waited.
We looked at each other as if there's some sort of clever ploy. But what happens sometimes is the minions are still spawning, and he's hit the end one, not the one he thought he was aiming at.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't die, and he probably doesn't die on the second turn either, because he's got double Bring It On, Whirlwind, Blood Razor. This still ends up with a board being cleared, but that is an uncharacteristic play from Maverick. He is not the kind of player who makes these basic technical mistakes.
Yeah, that really is. That used to happen with Doomhammer occasionally. If you attacked face and something was spawning from a Death Rattle, you hit the Death Rattle minion by mistake. But not seen that happen for a while here.
Yeah, looking to be equipping the Blood Razor, it would appear in this instance as well. You know, getting the damage in from the weapon. This isn't even necessarily the best play from Maverick, because he could maybe have equipped the Blood Razor and attacked first to set up the Death Rattle, but clearly we can see there, you were correct, Neil. Maverick takes it up 1-1 in what looked like, until right up at the end, a very convincing performance. I loved everything that Maverick was doing all along the way.
I enjoyed watching both parts of that. Savvat not messing around, doing that thing about posturing till 10 mana, and then just going for it. He went even more for it. He found a place to get the Spreading Plague and an early chance. But Maverick, it's a good job he accumulated all that armor. Recognition that he is going to not be able to stop every single thing that happens.
Very true.
He went up to something like 70 health, give or take, 65, and won the game when he was on like 10 or 15.
Right.
So really crucial that he had all that armor gain early.
Absolutely, and he did it very, very well. That's kind of the weakness of making so many minions there. When you're against a card that benefits off your opponent having multiple minions, like Unleash the Hounds or the Dry Whisker Armorer that we saw there, any deck that goes super wide on the board is going to be vulnerable to that, as we saw from Maverick's beautiful play with that Dry Whisker. But now he has the Fatigue Dead Man's Hand Warrior ready to go. Last hero standing, you queue up the deck that you just won with. And for Savvat here, even Paladin and even Shaman, neither of those feels pretty good to me, Neil. I think there's two pretty underwhelming matchups, and he's going with the even Shaman first.
That is interesting to me. I did feel that he would queue up the Paladin first, but maybe he's one of the people who buys into the fact that Shaman's no longer favoured against Paladin. So he doesn't want to run that as his later match.
Okay.
Whereas Paladin is at least 50-50. Because I felt that the Paladin's got more chance here. Maybe I'm just wrong.
I agree. I mean, we saw Maverick losing with his Fatigue Dead Man's Hand Warrior against an even Paladin earlier today in his quarter-final match.
And in that game, it looked really convincing because Valenier
wasn't even close.
Did its thing.
Yeah, exactly. It was absurd how much damage that managed to force through in that game. And obviously, Valenier onto the Saronite Chain Gang is the best possible case scenario, and your opponent doesn't have Owl. So that was a very flashy game, but is maybe not the best example of how that matchup will usually be working out. Whereas for the Shaman, I kind of feel like there's not that upper ceiling in terms of how well it can do.
Right.
Like, that's the best possible case scenario for the Paladin. But what does the Shaman have that is that ridiculous scenario?
I mean, it does have these brutally fast starts with the Flame Tongue, with the Direwolf, with the early Sea Giant. And the Warrior can struggle a little bit early, not necessarily to deal with the board, but to preserve its resources for the Deadmans.
Okay.
You can suck out a couple of executes this time around. It's not like last time you can just execute your 2 Sea Giants and that's done. If you can get rid of those executes this time, you've still got other stuff that they need to get rid of. And maybe you can deplete those cards so they can't be used twice.
So that's, I suppose, the main game plan here for Savvat, from what you're saying, I guess, is that he wants to go aggressive right at the start, try and close out the game nice and quickly. But with the way that this deck is constructed, with Alakir and Hagatha most likely in the later stages of the game, I guess he can try and curve into that. Like,
yeah, I don't
transition
think you win
into the late game.
I think you get yourself in a situation where the Warrior is struggling later on because it's used its resources, stopping you winning the early game. I don't think you just straight up batter them like we saw with Valenier earlier.
And I suppose the potential upper ceiling that I was talking about, the best case scenario for this Shaman is Sea Giant sticking. That's kind of when he runs away with the game, is when there's no execute or shield slam or brawl available to deal with it, which when I list all of them, that's 6 cards in a deck that's drawing a tremendous amount of cards. It feels very unlikely to actually work out.
When you first pick up this even Paladin, this even Shaman and play it, you get so frustrated. I just want Bloodlust. I would win every game if I had Bloodlust in my deck, except I wouldn't, of course. None of my cards would work.
So about even missing out on the healing totem there, which would have bolstered the survivability of his board against a Blood Razor to a pretty extreme degree, actually. The extra 1 in healing would have made a huge amount of difference, but still, he can make the numbers a little bit more awkward for Maverick by going for the taunt on the Defender of Argus here, just trying to keep up the pressure at the moment, it seems. Like you said, bait out a brawl, bait out an execute or warpath, something like that, so that you can follow up with Sea Giant and try to close out the game that way. Yeah,
if you get good stuff from Hagatha. We saw the other day, like Hagatha is very polarizing the cards it gets. There's a lot of rubbish, and 1 or 2 really, really good cards.
Yeah.
If you can get one of those 2 really good cards, the Warrior's a little bit undefended, like Bloodlust or
2 or 3
Spirit Echo
Echoes.
Yeah, those sort of cards. Spirit Echo is great because you start getting more cards, and you get more Spirit Echoes. Like you said, 2 or 3 of them would be nice, if a little unlikely.
I think that's a good way of putting it. As now for Maverick, you know, obviously he has fantastic options on this turn, but that's always how it feels as this Dead Man's Hand Warrior. You usually have fantastic ways to deal with aggro at the early game because it's almost all anti-aggro in this deck. The difficult part is, how do you best meter that out? What is the most valuable to you later on? So, for example, Acolyte Warpath there would have been great. Like, on this turn, that's a fantastic turn. You clear off all but 1 minion on your opponent's board, and you draw a card. But then Warpath is gone, which is going to be so good later on in the game. Like turn 10 onwards, that's a board clear pretty much every single time.
Yep. And so again, he's just gonna. Maverick has proved to be extremely good at sort of doing
patient.
that.
Yeah, unbelievably patient. Every time, like when he was playing with his controlled Warlock, I believe, and like for 5 turns in a row, I thought he was going to play Twisting Nether, and every single time he found an alternate solution. It was truly amazing.
And most of those solutions revolve around, okay, you've got a 4-3 and a 2-3. I don't care.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Put more stuff out there. Yeah. You're not making me bothered right now.
That's exactly it. It's not being flustered by a board.
You know what I'm really looking forward to if Maverick wins this tournament? What? Is every single player bringing Dead Man's Warrior to the next tournament. How much fun are we going to have with a million Dead Man's Mirrors?
Yeah. I'm not doing Austin, though. So I don't really care. He can do what he wants.
Could be a long day. Okay, Dry Whiskers picked up there, then put back in his hand. Yeah, not panicking about the fact there's an 8-8 and a 2-2 and various other minions hanging around.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of what he had in his hand, there wasn't all too much to actually deal with this giant. Obviously, there's the shield slam that we saw knocking about there, but I don't believe, when I get a look at his armor total, that there was too much way to utilize it. Oh, without the Dry Whisker, I suppose. So he's dealing with enough of this board at the moment to
I
make
don't
it work.
Need to brawl your 8-8. I can just deal with it.
Well, this feels like an even safer play because...
Yeah. Because you don't lose sometimes.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, you don't lose sometimes, and the Shaman is actually doing no damage to your face at all without some kind of help from the hand. And like we kept saying, the armor that you're losing there doesn't really matter. You've got Bring It On in your deck to start pulling you back up to those high health totals. Even in hand, the Armor Smith as well.
Yeah, and suddenly 20 just seems so much further away than 12. Like, ridiculously hard.
Yeah.
And Savvat's hand has petered out. It needs a Hagatha very soon because he's going to have no minions to back her up if this carries on.
Does, however, get to have the rare scenario where you end up with an elemental off of the Earthen Might. Firefly, however, really isn't what Savvat was looking for there. It was things like Kalamos, not really Ozruk. I'm thinking of the bigger end, Servant of Kalamos, cards like that actually have a large impact onto the board.
Yeah, Servant or Kalamos itself, like you say, would have been absolutely phenomenal there.
Yeah.
That damage that you can get from hand there is surprise damage as well. So.
And finally thinking it's worth going for the Brawl, because I guess the thing is now for Maverick, this is the other side of the coin when it comes to saving your removal all the time. It's easy to think of it when you're just watching him play that it is correct to always save your removal all the time, which is not necessarily the case. You want to wait for it until it is at the best point it will be for the rest of the game.
You don't win the game if you die with 3 Brawls in your hand and a couple of Warpaths, so you do have to actually use it, otherwise there's no point saving it.
Exactly. But
unless you're Zump, who seems to just never use his removal spells and win anyway.
So with the pickup of Bone Mare off the top, a card that has been seldom played in the past few months.
Yeah, it's better now it's been buffed, so it's an even cost minion.
Indeed.
And I think we'll see more of it as the meta slows down a little bit as well.
Yeah. I mean, for the stats, it's still fine. Like, with the Taunt and the kind of pseudo charge effect you're getting, it's really not that bad. It's just the fact that it requires a minion to be stuck on board kind of makes it not quite worth it at the 8 mana cost slot.
Yep, I agree with that. But again, with the meta slowing down just that little bit, suddenly 8 mana slot becomes slightly better than it was. You can get away with being a little bit more greedy, maybe.
That's right. I mean, buff cards will become better as the meta slows down, because with decks like this Warrior that rely on not removing every minion every time, cards that require minions to be on board and become very overstatted if they meet that requirement, like Blessing of Kings that we see, or the Bone Mare that we see
or this
here.
whole deck.
This whole deck, yeah, exactly. It becomes a lot more powerful.
Yeah, I think this may be one of the best decks. I mean, it's very hard to tell. Predictions are just a joke at this stage to some degree, but I do think this could be one of the best decks after the nerfs.
The Shaman?
Yeah. Well, both, in fact, but particularly the Shaman.
Yes, I'm definitely coming around to it. Like, obviously, when people were first experimenting with it, even Shaman just felt like a bit of a joke.
I haven't got Bloodlust, so I don't want to play this deck.
Exactly, but I'm definitely coming round to being persuaded of its power, but at the same time, not completely convinced yet. And
I'm not convinced it's good now. I mean, it's not bad. It's in the semi-finals of DreamHack Tour. Yeah. It's a decent deck, but I'm not convinced it's that powerful. But the fact it doesn't get hurt and all the other decks do, and it's not that bad,
right,
I think may make it really good going on tomorrow.
However, in terms of how difficult this deck is to play, Savvat needs to consider so heavily here what his play is. This single playing of the Sea Giant or holding it back into the hand dictates his game plan for the entire rest of the game, because obviously if you're just playing it from hand here, you're putting out way more pressure. You have the ability to win right on the spot. You're demanding an answer from your opponent, which traditionally is a very strong play in Hearthstone. If you are making your opponent have an answer and they don't have it, and even if they do, you have a backup plan, that's a good play. But the thing is here for Savvat, if he's met with an execute on the Giant or a brawl and it dies, his follow-up now, it's looking kind of lackluster.
Yeah, he's running out of things, but it's a different decision to the one he made last game, where it's like, let's go for it for the Wisps.
Yeah.
Because that's a straight race. You've got to do it before they draw their removal.
I agree.
This, there was a choice, like you explained. He had the choice to go a little slower.
Yeah.
And has decided, no, little slower doesn't work.
I agree.
Whereas with the Wisp, it was obvious that it wasn't going to work if he held on.
Because, you know, the obvious thinking is if he takes it slower and he draws Hagatha off the top, he can actually start to eke it out to a value tempo plan where he's still trying to win before fatigue, but he's utilizing that extra value to give consistent strong boards and using the spells he gets off Hagatha to deal with all the taunts in the way and get some face damage in. But Hagatha could be the bottom card in his deck for all he knows. He can't afford to wait for these higher value cards until a later point.
Yeah, he's done enough damage to make either option a threat as well. Hagatha could just rip a couple of, I know, lava bursts, and that's close to GG. So definitely worth consideration, but he wants to put stuff on the board, and this turn's even more interesting now.
Absolutely, as Maverick there taking the option, I believe, that plays around Hex most of all with the Liquid Membrane, probably the least chosen adaptation, like not targeted by spells and hero powers, is so rarely good.
Yeah, it's sometimes good on gigantic minions, but that's about it.
Yeah. On Tyrants.
Yeah, it's pretty good on that because it comes equipped with one. Interesting, you know what it's called as well.
Tyrantus?
No, Liquid Membrane.
Oh, right. I know.
Yes, even I know what Tyrantus is called. I just can't say it.
As now Maverick with Savvat realizing how badly he messed up the positioning.
Oh, no.
What is it with Shadowmourne? I think we've seen like 5 times here in DreamHack. Every single time, people put the weakest minion in the middle. That's not how you play around it. It's not Meteor. It's Shadowmourne.
Yeah, it's just instinct. That's exactly what it is.
Exactly.
It's instinct. Everybody does it that way because they've played against Meteor a million times, but still with that going on.
And he realizes there.
And it's probably costing the game.
He might have just missed lethal. Because it was, what, 0 damage that was taken, and it was, again, Greymane and a Giant. 6 damage he maybe missed out on there.
So he would have delivered lethal. Like, now the next thing you've got to do, if you're the great player I think you are, Savvat, is forget that. And he's doing that. He's not even looking for it. He's just, like, taking his minute that he has to gather his thoughts and work out how he's going to win this game of Hearthstone.
And it's still far from over.
That's what I mean. The mistake has happened. Forget the mistake. Worry about that tonight with your mates when they're saying how you lost that game in the semi-finals of DreamHack.
So now 5 damage AoE available with Warpath, which, because of the play of Defender of Argus, does not clear the board. So that's out for Maverick. You can't just go for the pure Warpath plan. Something might have to be drawn here. Or maybe we see 3 Warpaths into Bring It On Battle Rage, something like that, or Bring It On Dead Man's Hand.
Remember that Maverick may not have made that play as well, had the mistake not been made.
That's true.
There were other ways of killing some minions off, but there was more to it than that. But
there was, but still, that is the kind of play that you cannot make at the semi-final of a DreamHack.
Unless you want your opponent to stop tanking up and arming up. I'm not saying he did it on purpose, he definitely did it by mistake.
Right, okay.
But it's a play you can make.
You can stop right there.
I know you're going to cut me off and not let me get away with that.
Amazing bluff in history.
Yeah, it would have been pretty good.
As he's going with the kind of middle-of-the-road option of Dead Man's Hand, Bring It On, into Warpath, taking his chunk of damage here because he knows that it still technically keeps him alive. He's down to 6 health. 7 health, okay.
7 health.
So, very importantly, not dying to Alakir, which is a humongous breakpoint.
Oh, it's so difficult for Savvat to keep himself together here.
Because as soon as another, I mean, it's not even as soon as another armor gain effect is found. There is another armor gain effect. Shield block is there, Maverick can just deal with every minion every single turn, and Savvat making the very good play there of not playing Chain Gang because it was simply worse in that scenario.
And not pressing the button.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Oh, and with 2 more shield blocks now available to Maverick on top of the one he just played, he can get out of range of ever really dying here, and just look at Savvat. You can tell what this misplay has done to him.
Yeah, and this is the thing, you've got to come back. I remember a mistake a long time ago made by LB Dutch Boy in a match that he won 3-0 and ended up not winning because of a queuing error.
Okay.
He literally went 0-3 in that round to lose that game that he was winning.
Right.
And then went 0-6 or 0-4 in the tournament and then stopped playing for a few months. I mean, it just destroyed him. Savvat's made of stronger stuff, I feel, but these things can just really play on your mind. He's just going to get it out of his head. There's still a Hearthstone match going on.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. This is the kind of thing that we know he should not be doing, and he knows he should not be doing. He's so much better than this play that he made. But we're focusing on that, I think, maybe a little too much. Because in terms of the rest of the game that has been played here, it feels like it's been pretty on point. You know, he's been making nice, aggressive moves in the early stages of the game. Got his opponent down to 4 health, for goodness sakes, and had multiple, I believe, abilities to find lethal off of the top throughout the game, especially if he had not made that fatal mistake. But yes, while there was a blunder, overall, it feels like his strategy in this game is pretty on point. He's not trying to go for the super late game Valley plan, which probably would never work because you never outvalue Dead Man's Hand. And he's not trying to go too all in at the start on the pressure. He's taking a nice middle of the road route where every turn you're trying to make a board that's annoying enough for your opponent to deal with, but not every resource that you have thrown away.
Yeah, I mean, if he draws Hagatha, we're going to find out what happens if he draws Hagatha, because there she is.
And surely Savvat has to go for it here. Like, this 3-2 doesn't actually do anything anymore. You are giving your opponent a little bit more armor, but who cares? You are going to need some kind of miraculous set of spells here off of all your needs.
Save this Firefly for this purpose. He can't accidentally hero power anymore. That's good. And well, Hex is okay. It's not what he needs, though.
Yeah.
It's okay with other things.
It's fine. It's fine.
Rockbiter is okay with other things. It's okay with Alakia. Alakia and Rockbiter and Flame Tongue.
Sure.
That's
or even
a thing that can happen.
The card Wind Fury at some point in combination with Rockbiter. Like, all of these cards can find uses at later stages.
Hex with Rockbiter and Alakia is a setup. It's a 2-turn thing, but there's a lot of damage available there. But unfortunately, 2-turn things against this warrior deck are so hard to figure.
Just how do you overcome this? His Battle Rage, the last 2 turns, like this could be like 5 Battle Rages he'd played in 2 turns potentially with the effect of Dead Man's Hand. Like, these are not the situations in which you win against Dead Man's Hand, warrior. You win when, if they enter the late stages of the game, they are Dead Man's Handing, but they're drawing 1 card a turn because you've pressured them into playing Battle Rage earlier on.
Still got 2 minions left. Gonna push the damage while it's available to him. Oh, why do you always draw the defensive cards in this deck?
I mean, that's just the way Shaman works. You've got a few offensive cards in there, like obviously Lightning Bolt, Rockbiter, which he found, Lava Burst, Bloodlust as the premier option, Unstable Evolution, which can be very powerful.
I'm sure the Shaman cards were fine in the original Odd Paladin. With Cauldron and stuff going on.
Oh, yeah.
And suddenly they're garbage in the same Shaman deck that's basically doing the same thing.
That's fair. I mean, they were never good. It's just that you had a billion...
Yeah, they were cards.
A billion 1/1s, and you had to do something with them, and Cauldron was kind of the best we had on day 1 of the expansion.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gallant.
Just for a second, it looked like somebody had broken the meta. Nerf Cauldron, they cried. Nobody ever did for stranger reasons. I guess that's why we don't get day 1 nerfs, oddly enough.
As now more and more fantastic cards being found for Maverick. He just needs to consider now, as this maybe could enter a fatigue game plan, because obviously Savvat, it very likely will enter a fatigue game plan. Savvat drawing 1 card a turn. Obviously his minion pressure does absolutely nothing here. There's a multitude of ways for Maverick to completely deal with this board incredibly easily without even taking any damage. So what it really comes down to is thinning his hand of the bad cards, which is why we see the Shield Slam coming down there. He's not afraid of tall minions. He just wants to make sure every turn he's gaining armor, clearing the board of totems, and drawing cards.
I think one thing that goes missing a little bit when you're watching someone like Maverick play this deck is how hard this deck is to play.
Yep.
you know, when you pick up this deck for the first couple of days, you end up shuffling back in like 4 owls and, I don't know, something you don't need, and then all your executes are gone. And all the time, Maverick is getting rid of that junk, even when we're not commentating on it. He's just constantly getting rid of stuff. As Alakir into what?
Well, I mean, if you're going to have any card reduced by the effect of Farsight, that's probably the one, because it starts to open up those combos.
Whoa, game might be less over than it was.
So what have you got? You got Alakir into Rockbiter is your 12 damage burst, which is surprisingly close. You know, it's starting to finish them off. If you get another Rockbiter, that's all of a sudden 18 burst damage. Obviously, that has to actually happen first. And you were oohing at the Ancestral Spirit, which would be very nice indeed to give you a more resilient minion.
Yeah, I mean, if you do, we're saying about the difficulty of sticking something over 2 turns against this warrior. I doubt that does enough, but maybe it just makes it awkward enough for the warrior. But look, Maverick's been on autopilot for the last 6 or 7 turns. Trying to think what else can go with this 5-drop Alakir to hand this over.
The thing is, though, for Maverick, whether he goes for the Bring It On or not, either way, it potentially makes the Alakir better, because if Alakir is just played here for 12 damage, there's actually multiple options that could give him lethal off of Hagatha. This somehow, Neil, as you correctly mentioned, is not over.
Oh my goodness.
That's 12, 14. This is 2 damage.
If he drops Alakir and picks up one of a host of options, Lava Burst would do it, a second Rockbiter would do it, and he's going to actually just push it 1 more turn because he wants to get 1 more minion. But maybe there's a chance there. Maybe there were 3 or 4 cards that would have done it, I think.
So this is now lethal as it currently stands. Obviously, from where we're sitting, we can see Harrison to destroy the weapon or
but how does he destroy the weapon just gives Savvat the chance to dump and pray. He's got a 10 to 15% chance of winning the second he drops the card. Because Alakir will draw a card.
Yes.
We need to make that clear to everybody. Alakir will draw a card, and it could be anything.
Generate a card.
Yeah, and 10 to 15% of the time, that would be enough to win the game. I can't do the exact numbers. There's just
You reckon it's that high?
Well, I reckon there's something like 30 Shaman spells.
Right.
So, Rockbiter, Lava Burst, Lightning Bolt.
Fair enough.
That's 10% before we start, and then there's probably 1 or 2 we've forgotten that might get it done.
However, here, some kind of defensive option should be taken by Maverick to protect him. I mean, he obviously has no idea how bad of a situation he's in.
Yeah, he's not thinking about 5-drop Alakir. What's going to come? He didn't...
Unless he was thinking there, maybe he had the Death Rattle on his weapon, which obviously would have gained him lots of armor. This is Savvat's chance to potentially take this game. Healing Rain
just the worst card for him. And now he has to take care of the Armor Smith.
Like, Maverick knows this is all burst gone, and if Savvat goes all in here, brings his opponent down to 2 health, no ability to close out the game right now. Obviously, Maverick goes DEFCON 1, draws all the armor he possibly can. Savvat looks like he's going to be throwing the game down there. That came so unbelievably close right at the end. Maverick, to be perfectly honest, I don't think he was being pessimistic enough in that scenario.
I've won this game. How do I ever lose? I know a 5-mana Alakir would be a bit awkward, especially as Savvat's been hoarding those cards. He was allowed to have a lot of damage hanging around.
That's right. And it was still so unlikely that he ended up losing, because for any kind of lethal to come down, it had to be exactly Alakir off of the far side. That was the only way that there was enough mana for a burst combo in 1 turn.
But your phrase, he needs to be pessimistic. He needs to identify what is the one way. We saw a player the other day keeping, like it was Maverick, keeping about 2 owls against a paladin deck he had beat to get rid of the Valor near
minions.
Should it matter? Yeah. Because it was the only way he could lose.
That was an incredibly cool game to watch.
I also want to point out there, Savvat chose the exact right turn to go for it. Like, he can't see the hand like we can. He knows there's armor coming next turn.
Sure.
Okay, the Armor Smith makes it more clear, but he gave himself the exact longest number of minions played and cards drawn to give him that opportunity.
I don't know, it's such a close one because, again, so the thing I was saying is maybe Maverick wasn't being pessimistic enough and therefore he should have played Bring It On. The thing is, Bring It On doesn't necessarily increase his chances of surviving 100%, because Savvat could have a couple of minions in hand, and if you reduce the cost of the minions in hand, maybe that reduces the cost of an 8-mana Alakir. Maybe Alakir is the full mana cost. You reduce it down to 6, and then he does have the ability to go Alakir.
But Maverick could have used a Whirlwind effect with his Armor Smith just to gain 2 or 3 armor to make things a little bit safer.
Yeah, okay, I agree.
He used a lot of mana that turn on messing around.
Yes, it was maybe not... Again,
I don't think he can play the Bring It On.
It was so specific. It was so specific that Maverick had to play around it there.
Fair enough, and he's probably got other things on his mind, like triple lava burst.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's probably seeing other pessimistic things that we weren't looking at without our caster vision.
Like maybe if there was Spirit Echoes or something, he needs those Whirlwind effects or something like that. But in this particular game, however, as we move on to the next, potentially final game of this series, Maverick is going to be functioning in relatively the same way in this series, I would imagine. The end game for the Paladin is the main difference, however, as you are obviously not transitioning into Hagatha and spells and value. You're basically trying to transition into Valanir to take the game.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately basically the only thing that goes on. Okay, there's Tarim plays as well, that's the other part of it, but yeah.
So Maverick, I suppose, playing around 2 things here by attacking into the higher attack Amani Berserker there. Obviously the potential for Blessing of Kings, because he doesn't want to have the higher attack minion buff by Blessing of Kings. And also just giving himself more flexibility on the following turn, because if he attacks into the Beetle, he has to attack in again with the second charge of the weapon on the following turn. Whereas, as it currently stands, you just don't attack in here. You don't need to, because you want to save it back for Call to Arms. You're not heading into turn 6, so clearing off a board of scrubby little dudes for Tarim is not a necessity.
It's amazing to see this. There's 230-something players entered this event, and we've got the Dead Man's Warrior on the verge of getting to the final. And there weren't that many here. There were a few.
It was Odemian?
Odemian was another one, yeah.
Kill Surprise.
Odemian's a big fan of this deck, always has been.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he's not there yet. Savvat has got, outside of Valanir, pretty much the best hand you could hope for. He would really like a Blessing of Kings, so...
This hand's pretty good. You know, this is most of a board clear, available with minimal commitment to the board, available for Maverick, or at least, sorry, minimal commitment in terms of resources. And he does want to start clearing up the board on this turn because of the potential for Tarim on the following turn.
And we have seen this game can come down many turns from now to 2 or 3 damage done much, much earlier. Like, the Paladin tends to sort of not quite fall over the finishing line. So every sneaky bit of damage that Savvat can find without being too ridiculous is very much worth it. Going for the juggle.
A little bit of jugglies here as he does get it out right at the start, but somehow manages to get the biggest board juggler I've ever seen in a while.
Yeah, board's not good at juggling.
And both juggles missing there does not feel good at all for Savvat. But at the same time, he's still got a nice little board here. If it's not dealt with, Hero Power Tarim next turn feels fantastic to get all this damage through to face. And yes, the equality has been used, so Avenging Wrath kind of diminishes in value to an extent.
Right.
But there's not really that many high health minions in the Warrior deck. It's not like against Warlock where you need to go Equality Avenging Wrath to beat Voidlord.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to go, a lot of that's going to go face, basically.
Which is where you want it to go. That's the point of the card in this matchup, is a pseudo Pyroblast.
Again, trying to, I mean, Maverick just always has a handful of good cards.
Maybe he put 30 good cards in a deck.
That'd be a good idea, right? I know it's really weird. Sometimes just a tournament, a deck that's right for a job. This is Last Hero Standing. You can afford to bring a deck that's a risk.
Right.
Because if it goes wrong, you lose one game. That's bad, but you don't have to get it countered like you do in Conquest.
And taking a look here at Savvat's hand, I was just thinking, with the Token Druid, even Shaman, and even Paladin, does he have double Sea Giant in every one of his decks that is not the Warlock?
Does seem
it looks like that way, doesn't it? Yeah.
He's concluded that Mountain Giants are good, but I don't want to play Control, so I'm going to play my own Mountain Giants in a different form.
Yeah. The thing is, though, if you're bringing Sea Giants and you're banning Warlock, like, obviously Warlock is not playing many minions, and they're going to be clearing the board, but they do suffer against single large minions. But maybe you just never get to play the Sea Giant against Warlock. It's an interesting point. As Savvat is expectedly just trying to turn up the heat as quickly as possible. Death Coil is not a bad card to get there at all. There's potentially, with Avenging Wrath and the Death Coil there, 13 damage available from hand if there's no minions on board.
Yeah, at any point, that's, you could just hold on to that,
Boom,
chip
boom,
away
boom.
somehow.
Yep.
The Lich King a little bit annoying here as well. Lich King's always a little bit annoying.
A little bit annoying, but Maverick has some very nice answers here indeed to be moving along with. His hand is still looking absolutely fine here for me. He's got a good amount of cards in hand. If he needs a specific card, he can just go for the Flame Elemental, attack in, Battle Rage, and draw like 4 cards on that turn.
Savvat, though, 3 turns in a row just produced a big thing to deal with if he plays a Sea Giant here. He may be tempted just to lob it out there. He's just seen an execute.
Yes, that's true.
We just lob it onto the board, despite the fact it's a bit expensive.
But you're vulnerable to Hero Power Shield Slam. Like, you want to be lowering that armor total first.
That's what he's going to do.
Think before you throw that down.
How annoying is it to have to put that into a 1/2 minion, this 4 damage?
That feels pretty bad.
But you need to build the wide board, and to protect that wide board, you need to kill the Acolyte, as well as obviously prevent the card draw. I know what Savvat's thinking. I've got a good idea of how that card being hovered over. He's thinking 13, huh?
Exactly. He's thinking of launching all of those missiles directly through to his opponent's face. And while Maverick has managed to put himself at, what, 25 health, way back towards the starting health total, if Savvat can just stick 1 large minion here, or 1 large board, be it through Sea Giant or a couple of dudes with Tarim, then he can start moving towards finishing the game so quickly.
And he did what you said about the Sea Giant. It's going to be met with an unfortunate execute. But he waited until there's no armor gain for that shield slam available.
Or at least necessarily. Like, it would have to be a 2-card combo.
But make them have other things as well. Unfortunately, it walks into whirligig, into execute.
It would definitely appear that way. There's the copy of Battle Rage in Maverick's hand, which, like, I mean, looking at this hand, it's pretty good to go for Dead Man's Hand here. Like, maybe you play the Stonehill first, or he's playing the Owl first because he doesn't want to shuffle that back in.
Yep.
Wait, does he not want to shuffle that back in?
Well, I'm thinking Valanier is now a live action and ready to go.
I'm thinking you definitely want to shuffle the Owl back in.
Anyway.
Maybe he's not running the Valanier due to Sea Giants being in there as the kind of alternate tech to deal with the large minions. Or the control decks.
Of, yeah. All right, so 21 there to do. What I've been surprised about when watching Maverick is how after you play Garrosh, your armor total hangs on in there. Like, you think you've lost your armor up ability, it's going to be hard. But actually, with the Dry Whisker and the Bring It On and Shield Block, it manages to hold on in there. You keep thinking, oh, going down to 19, he's lost his hero power, got him.
Yeah.
No, it's not quite how it works out.
As for Maverick, some interesting choices here. Lich King, obviously, if he was on the aggressive side, would be the snap pick there. You wouldn't even think about it. But on the defensive side, Phantom Militia can be very powerful, just to kind of put up a big wall that your opponent can't deal with either a wide board of small minions or 1 singular minion, because they have to attack into several different taunts. But instead going for the Lich King, because if it does survive for 2 or 3 turns, that's pretty much a lockout victory.
Yeah, it has a lot of defensive options as well as a lot of offensive ones. We think of it in terms of, hitting your opponent in the face, but you can heal yourself, you can get another weapon, most, again, for defensive purposes. So actually a lot of those attacking, it's clever the way the Lich King works as both.
Yeah.
So I'm running out of stuff.
I wonder.
Still trying to just stick that 1 all-important board, though. It's getting...
more and more creative.
Exactly. It's getting more and more difficult to stick the board, and also the benefit of sticking a board is getting lessened and lessened as time goes on. Obviously, the main one is still there in Sunkeeper Tarim, which you're just going to be letting rip with right now. You really don't want to be doing that if you're not getting any attacks through to face, but he's realizing if I don't, the board dies 100% of the time anyway. So this is my last chance for Tarim to be good, and if he has a board clear, so be it.
Juggler did his job for once as well, making it easier. But like you say, this is the same situation with the Wisps now to some degree. Savvat out of options, so all in and hope one of those, or all of those 9 cards your opponent has are bad.
And I don't even want to think about what insane record this Dead Man's Hand Warrior must be now.
Yeah, we've seen it 9-1 on stream, I think.
Yeah, exactly, like absurdly good. It's won 3-1, sorry, it's won all 3 of the games.
3 times.
3 times.
And it's lost once that I've seen.
Exactly. Of all 4 times that Maverick has been on stream.
He's probably not won with it off stream. He just keeps losing and cursing how bad it is.
I mean, very possibly, because he has been facing the good lineups. Like, it's always they're running Quest Rogue or Warrior or Warlock, but not both.
Yeah, he's really torn through this field. And it's great to see him doing well. He is a player that, like I said earlier, he's 28 wins, 14 losses in tour stops without qualifying for one this year. That's 67%. Wow. You're entitled to have qualified for a tour stop with that percentage. Almost everybody with 67% over a decent sample has qualified for one.
Has qualified.
And
the likes of Muzzy and Zalay, players like that.
Yeah, players. Yeah. They're on a bit like Muzzy in particular, sort of 70, something like that, mid-70s. Okay. Zalay was up to 80 at one point, but he qualified for 2.
Right.
But players like Impact are like 64, 65% haven't qualified.
Got you.
Second you hit 70%, a lot of the Asian players as well have qualified on 68, 69. He's very unlucky not to have won his games in a different order in tour stop play.
However, if you can be the champion of an open sign-up tour stop, such as
yeah, sure, who cares, right?
Tour. Exactly. That's your name on a tour stop joining the, 8 or 9 players who have won a tour stop. This is the 9th tour stop at this point. That's such a selective group of players.
He's previously 61% at DreamHacks, and DreamHacks are a step above because the people who are here want to, you know, you're not just sitting at home going, oh, I'll play a tournament tonight.
Right.
You know, they've
a big deal. You probably have to be
here,
on
they're probably
team.
Prepared, right.
Yeah.
So Maverick has been nailing these events for some time now.
As Savvat finally lets rip with his his copy of Equality and Avenging Wrath to launch as much damage to Fates as he possibly can. But we can clearly see with 2 copies of Bring It On, still more draw, more taunts available in the Gem-Studded Golem and the Lich King itself for Maverick. It just doesn't look like this is ever going to get him. Maybe if he'd used all copies of Armageddon before going for Dead Man's Hand, then Maverick would be in a situation where he can't quite stand up to this burst damage that Savvat is throwing down. However, we can see that is just not going to be the case. I struggle to envisage a scenario where Maverick does not move through to the finals here.
I agree, and that's why I started sort of blasting stats out. Really. I'm also thinking he knows what this card is from the Lich King, and Savvat gives it up. Maverick pumps his fists in the air. He is through to a final in his surrogate home country, and he's going to be there. But Savvat has done a great tournament with different lineup to most people, his own semi-final, and hopefully put his name on the map as well.
Absolutely. We've seen very strong play from him. The most distinctive moment obviously being his 3-0 series with even Shaman, not a thing that I think anyone would have anticipated going into the tournament. But in terms of decks that no one was anticipating, this Dead Man's Hand Warrior from Maverick, what a sleeper. Truly insane in terms of how well it's been doing against the field of relatively aggressive board-based decks.
I mean, what a performance by Maverick in this tournament. It's been an absolute tear, quite honestly. The couple of times we've seen him on stream, you know, he went 3-0 with his Warrior twice, then the Warrior got knocked out a little bit early. The only time we've actually seen it really suffer in a series was to an even Paladin that had a lot of value from a Valinir, but then the Warlock sort of stepped in and filled in the gaps and the weaknesses for that matchup. It was just such an unexpected result, but honestly, now that you really look at the matchups and you think about the results that we've seen, it makes a lot of sense. And his lineup is taking him all the way to the finals.
Yeah, when you see it in the lineups, you think, oh, that's cute. Somebody bought Dead Man's, great. And then you see what he's doing with it. It's like, oh, okay, that's more than cute. We've got 57 mirror matches of this at Austin. He's
leaving many dead men in his wake. Well, okay, you say 57 mirror matches of that in Austin, and I cross my fingers that that's not going to happen, but we are going to be seeing the balance changes, and a lot of the decks that this deck is strong against are going to be made weaker or eliminated, in this case even Paladin, so maybe that will affect the overall effectiveness of that Warrior deck, but also some decks that it's a little bit weak against are going to be getting hit a little bit, in particular Cube Warlock.
Right, so it's going to be very interesting to see how everything's placed in the meta, but particularly this even Shaman and this Dead Man's Warrior that we just saw that aren't getting hit themselves, but like you say, the things they prey on may be different.
Absolutely, and that is our first finals participant. It is Maverick, who is going to be going up against the winner of our second semifinal of the day. It is going to be Scruffy taking on Blizes. Our second and final semifinal will determine who will be meeting Maverick in the grand finals of this tournament. So don't go anywhere, guys. More of the DreamHack HCT Grand Prix is coming right up.